It was just a address to Congress and the country, but it was a pseudo State of the Union. I thought I was going to be really bored, quite frankly, because I hate State of the Unions normally, and I wasn't bored at all. I was highly entertained. But before the State of the Union, I was really disappointed this week on Monday night that the Senate voted on a bill that would bar transgender women and girls from participating in school athletic competitions designated for females. The bill failed to gain the 60 votes needed to advance it in the chambers of the Senate and stuck to party lines. The final vote was 51-45. Not one single Democrat, not even John Fetterman, voted for this bill. The House had already passed a similar legislation with 2 Democrats in support. Just a reminder, in a recent New York Times Ipsos survey found that 79% of Americans, including the majority of Democrats, do not think that transgender athletes should be permitted to compete in women's sports. Jennifer, I would like to welcome you in. Jennifer Sey, thank you so much for joining me. You are a champion on the front lines of this issue for a long time. For people that don't know, can you just give a little background on your life as an athlete, and then what led you to touch this third rail and be such a champion of it, and start your new clothing line, XXXY?
Yeah, I'll give you the top line. As a young person, I was an elite gymnast, brutal training environment, which most folks know at this point because of the Larry Nassar case. 1986 national champion, 7-time national team member. I left the sport, was a complete mess because of the abusive training environment for nearly 20 years. Wrote my first book, which was a memoir about that. Got dragged across the internet for exposing the abuse. I was the first gymnast to expose the abuse in the sport. So that was my first sort of run at a mini cancellation, I would say. At that same time, I was an executive moving my way up at Levi's. I started there as a junior marketing person, worked all the way up to brand president 23 years later, 20 years later. I got myself canceled in corporate America for pushing back on COVID lockdowns and school closures, and found myself, without a job in 2023. And I decided to start my own line because you can't get canceled a second time, I figured. And, combining my background as an athlete as well as a brand builder, it just felt like no one else was going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. And all these brands, Nike, et cetera, they all pretend to stand up for women, and they do no such thing. They won't even, touch this with a 10-foot pole. And I feel like this is the major issue, protecting women's sports from males entering them, the biggest issue facing female athletes today.
Jennifer, I remember when you came out, when you were an executive at Levi's, and it really created a big, there was a big echoing and tentacles everywhere because it was so brave. And, you don't see a lot of people in those kind of positions willing to risk their job for, things like, speaking out against basic tyranny.